Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I am here to talk about how to facilitate workshops, as some of you have requested me to cover this topic. And recently I've been doing a lot of preparation work in order to facilitate a workshop. So I thought this would be a perfect opportunity as I am doing something that I need to do for work anyways. So one of the things that I've been working on is post-merger and acquisition process to integrate a select number of employees from a different company, and then how to incorporate them and integrate them into our HR system. So I've been doing a lot of business requirements gathering. I've been preparing questionnaires and just to make sure that I have a better understanding before I step into this workshop. So if this is something that you want to learn more, then just keep on watching. So you have to think about who your stakeholders are going to be and who are the people that are going to be required to attend this workshop. And you also have to think about what is the overall objective of this workshop. What is the purpose of having a workshop in the first place? And then you can have more specific actionable goals as part of your agenda. So some topics that you want to cover specifically. Going back to an example of maybe you want to implement a new system for purchasing department, then you can say the overall objective is to better understand the business processes of how purchase requisitions and purchase orders get created, and what are the different levels of approvals are required depending on the dollar value of each item, right? That could be an overall objective. And sub topics or other items to cover during the workshop can be things like what are some specific information that's required to create a requisition, what are some of the specific information that you are currently able to see when you run a report in your system, what are some of the critical information that you would like to get out by implementing this new reporting functionality that you've never had before. So the next step actually involves investigation, where you have to go to the business and ask them for any policy manuals, any specific documents, and or current requisitions or purchase orders or any type of Excel spreadsheets that you can basically review in preparation for this workshop. And I think preparation is the key to build trust and connection with your customers, because you can actually wow them by being so prepared and already having a pretty good understanding of their business and what their day-to-day business processes look like by doing your homework. And the only way you can wow them is if you actually prepare. If you sit down, hunker down, and go through all of their current requisitions, you know exactly what kind of information that they need. By going through current approval process and understanding exactly who the final approvals are for different types of purchase orders, right? These are the information that nobody's gonna hand it over to you. And if you attend a workshop and have absolutely no idea of what your customers' businesses, what their day-to-day operations look like, it's gonna be really hard to influence them or to even win them over, right? When I attended one of the business analyst workshops, the professor told me that the best kind of business analysts are the types of BAs that customers think that they work for us, right? Not for another company. They're not a bunch of consultants or business analysts that work for a big corporation just for a short period of time. The best kind of BAs are the ones that customers think that, those BAs work for us and not for another company, right? And the only reason for you to get to that level is by really having a sound understanding. And it's okay for you to not have a complete understanding. I'm not saying that you have to know absolutely everything, but it's definitely helpful because a lot of the times customers lean on you in terms of industry practices. What do other customers do, especially if you're an external business analyst. and work in consulting, work for one of the big consulting firms, they're definitely going to, try to leverage and get an insight as to, what the best practices are and what do other customers do, right? So essentially, being prepared will help you win your customers over, and also it can definitely make you more trustworthy. When I'm talking about presentation preparation, another important things that you need to think about are visual aids. So people are wired to visualizations, and they love storytelling. So when you're going into this workshop, try to think about what kind of visual aids you're going to be using. So most often I try to prepare PowerPoint presentation slides, and also, if applicable, if it's like a system walkthrough or changes within a new system, then I do a demonstration, as well as, I think of a storyline of, what exactly am I trying to achieve. So depending on my audience, sometimes I would say, Jimmy is he's a purchasing agent. He's been working at the company for 10 years. And today he's trying to enter a purchase requisition using this new tool. And I'm going to show you exactly how Jimmy can do that, right? So depending on your audience, just think about how you want to deliver a message. And if you're trying to build rapport with end users, then try to use their language and show them exactly what that change is going to look like. And I still remember that one time I did a walkthrough with a guy. He's a supervisor, and his eyes were just so widened, and he was so excited after I showed him that, with this new system, that he can actually he's able to keep track of all the inventories and different types of costs that are associated with a specific work order, which has never been the case in the past, because it's always been paperwork and people never had time to give him proper estimates. So once he found out that he was able to get the estimates right on time, as it's required in the system for all these different stakeholders to enter all this information, he was just blown away, right? He was just so excited because this is not something that he's ever seen before. And he became one of the key agents who helped us to go through and navigate the changes that were brought within that organization. So this sort of really helped me understand that, know your audience and know exactly what kind of visual aids or what kind of stories you're going to tell them. Another key thing to remember as you're preparing and thinking about your workshop is, if you're using any visual aids, like PowerPoint presentations, make sure you talk to an IT guy and, get that all sorted out, so then you don't run into a technical issue right in the middle of your workshop or at the beginning of a workshop. I mean, I've personally been there. I've had to do a technical demo and to feature a customer, and I was basically not ready because I didn't have enough time to set up everything, and took away precious 2 or 3 minutes of the workshop at the beginning, because I was just trying to scramble and figure out how to use a projector, right? Like, you just don't want to be in that situation where you're feeling sweaty and you're just so nervous, and you're just trying to do something so simple, but because of the pressure, you just can never figure it out. So make sure you're prepared in different aspects. So make sure you think about what kind of different technical difficulties you might run into, and make sure you run it through and smooth it out, so then your workshop can be as ready and smooth as possible. So on the day of your actual workshop, make sure you arrive on time. Please do not be late. It just does not look professional if you're running late. And also, if you're going to be late, then please give everybody else a heads up and let them know that you're going to be running slightly late. That's just a common courtesy, in my opinion. But when you do attend a workshop for the first time, it's natural for you to introduce yourself and also ask other people to do the same. especially if it's the first time and you're not familiar with the key stakeholders or you've never worked with them. It's important to build rapport and be familiar with everyone's names. Another very important thing that you need to remember while you're facilitating workshop is to be very specific in your ask. So there are two versions of this example. So the first example goes something like this. Can somebody from purchasing explain what the purchasing requisition process looks like? So that's example number one. And example number two looks like this. Hey Jimmy, I understand that you are the subject matter expert from purchasing with the years of experience you have. Can you please walk us through the steps of how to create a purchase requisition? Now let's think about what this sounds like to Jimmy. If we look at the first example, Jimmy doesn't even know if, the facilitator is asking him to do it. But for the second example, Jimmy knows exactly what he needs to do because he knows what he's doing. He knows that he's being specifically asked to do specific task, right? So the next thing you have to remember when you're facilitating workshop is that you have to listen very intently, listen very carefully as to what people say. Even if they ramble, even if you have questions in your head and you're like, hey, that doesn't make sense, just write down all of your thoughts and all of your questions. Do not interrupt them and just let them finish and try to listen and see if you can summarize what they're saying in a sentence or two, even if they ramble on. So this is something that I always try to do, is especially when I'm facilitating a workshop, I listen very carefully what people are saying, and then I, even if I have any questions, like I just let them finish whatever, it is that they're talking about, and then I try to summarize what they just said, and then I actually repeat back to them and ask them to see if I got the point correctly, if I got the summary correct. I think it's incredibly important for you to take notes while you're listening to somebody and try to take summaries of what they're saying and make sure that you understand what they're telling you. And then after I write down my own versions of notes, what I do is I repeat what they just said, but in a summarized version. And then I ask them, so Jimmy, do you think this is an accurate representation of what you've just explained to me about XYZ? And then once Jimmy gives me confirmation, then I know for a fact that I was able to capture that notes correctly, right? So that's why it's really important for you to listen carefully, because if you don't listen, or if you're daydreaming, if you're thinking about doing something else, you're going to completely miss what Jimmy just explained. And then you're not going to remember exactly what the purchasing requisition process should look like, right? Because those are the important information that you need to capture in your requirements document later on. If you ever find that somebody during the workshop just tends to ramble on and explain something in very much detail that you don't really understand, or you don't think that's appropriate for everybody on to listen to during the workshop, then you can actually make an exception and interrupt them and say, hey Jimmy, I can see that you're very passionate about this topic and you have a lot of invaluable input, but in the interest of time, would it be okay if we have an offline discussion and talk more about the purchasing requisition process? Would that work for you, right? So you have to sort of like balance and do a fine act when you're facilitating the workshop, because you don't want, other people to start wandering off and daydreaming because they don't really care about this particular topic. Make sure that you give them enough time for them to actually give you what you need. But if they tend to really start going off tangent and ramble on, then you have to make sure that you kind of bring them back, so then everybody can kind of stick to the agenda and make sure that you get what you need from this workshop, right? So it is important to also keep that in mind, especially if you are facilitating. So towards the end of the workshop, I try to reserve 10 to 15 minutes for any kind of Q&A, as well as the summary of what was discussed in today's workshop, and also to suggest what the next steps are going to be. So these are, these could be action items or some other things that need to take place after this workshop. What I really like to do is to summarize the findings or any kind of action items that we discussed in the meeting, and then make sure that I say them out loud, so then people are aware that they need to follow up and do XYZ. And then I also say, as a follow-up, we're going to set up a smaller offline discussion with Jimmy and Henry, specifically on purchasing requisition, right? So this kind of gives a guidance as to what the next steps are going to be. And then I also make sure that we have time for Q&A. And then, if I notice that somebody wasn't participating enough, then I also try to give, not to pick on them, but I try to give an opportunity so then they have a chance to speak up, right? Because not everyone is a talker, and you'll notice right away that there are people who are willing to talk and there are people who are just listeners, right? And they don't really participate as much. So sometimes I would say, Henry, we haven't heard from you about, what your thoughts are on this new requisition process. Do you have any questions for me? Do you have any feedback? So this is basically giving somebody a chance to be more inclusive, especially if they felt like they weren't able to contribute much. So this is another thing that you can do, is as a facilitator, to make sure that everybody's input is valid. That's it for today's video on how to facilitate workshops. I hope that you guys found it useful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!